Hello guys, this is your friend and we are back with a new fanfic. Which is what if Naruto was banished and trained by Hiruzen, Kushina, and Tsunade to become the strongest swordsman, part 1. And if you enjoy this fanfic then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start a fanfic. Welcome to Konoha, and now we skip the blah 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 that all of you have read countless times. Let me just cut to the chase for you all. 10 years ago the Kyuubi was released from Kushina Uzumaki, the wife of the 4th Hokage, after giving birth to triplets, though the first named Naruto was born 20 minutes before the other two, and said 4th Hokage was forced to fight to save them before the 3rd Hokage, Hiruzen Sarutobi, attempted the Reaper Death Seal to seal away the Kyuubi. However, he had attempted it on Naruto as he was eldest, but the boy's body rejected the Kyuubi's chakra and he was forced to seal the body in Naruto and its chakra into the two younger of the triplets. The second astonishing thing, Naruto's body rejecting the Kyuubi was the first, was that the Shinigami gave Hiruzen a pass on summoning him but it did weaken him slightly, pushing his chakra reserves to that of a Jonin instead of a Sannin, which was counted as a fair trade. Anyway, for 5 years Kushina and Minato, the 4th Hokage, raised and treated their children equally, but that changed when the two younger children, Kiwon and Arashi, began exhibiting chakra and Kyuubi's chakra, making them focus on them, leaving poor Naruto alone. From there Naruto was essentially raised by the few friends he had. Makoto Uchiha, the Uchiha matriarch and clan head after her bastard of a husband was executed for treason after he stole the Forbidden Scroll and tried to get the Uchiha clan to learn from it. Sarada and Sasuke Uchiha, Makoto's twin youngest children that were Naruto's age. Itomi Uchiha, Makoto's eldest and the youngest Anbu captain in history. Shizune, the apprentice of Naruto's godmother Tsunade. Ayame Ichiraku, a civilian ramen chef that worked with her father. Yugao Azuki, one of his mother's students and an Anbu captain that specialized in swordsmanship. Hana Inuzuka, the daughter of Minato's teammate Sume. Kurenai Yuhi, a young chunin that specialized in genjutsu. Tamari and Gaara Subaku, the oldest and youngest children of the Kazekage that Naruto met when said man came for treaty talks. And Anko Mitarashi, a young girl who was betrayed by her sensei Orochimaru and Naruto treated as a friend regardless of who else said anything. The worst part was that Naruto's godfather and godbrother neglected him too in favor of his siblings. Tsunade was innocent in the neglect as she was mostly too busy at the hospital with being the best doctor or training new doctors and medic nins to spend quality time with the trio, so she usually had Shizune give them their gifts during holidays or events, or Naruto would get his by stopping by to see her. Naruto never told Tsunade about the neglect as he knew she saw Kushina as a daughter and didn't want to wreck that relationship for Tsunade. Moving on, we come to you 10 years into Naruto's life because we find him packing his things that he kept at the Uchiha compound. The reason for his packing was because he was planning to leave the village after finally getting fed up with everything and knew he needed to. You see, he felt that he wouldn't receive the training he would need as a shinobi if he stayed, and he was right. His friends taught or helped him with what they could, but with their individual schedules it wasn't a ton, and a few days ago when Naruto learned tree climbing on his own, he showed it off to his family only to have his father and mother scream at him, and his mother actually slapped him and sent him to his room, which he rarely slept in anyway, and that was the last straw for Naruto as he blew up at them and tore into them about hating them and how he wished he was never made part of their family before leaving. It was 2 days ago that he overheard a samurai that was guarding the fire daimyo on one of his many visits talking about how Iron Country had the greatest swordsmen and fighters in general that could stand up to any ninja. It was yesterday that he told his friends, which included Hiruzen, though the man was more focused on his own grandson than on Naruto, that he was planning to leave and go to Iron Country and train till he was 16 so he could be adequately trained and prepared for his life. His friends understood, though Sarada, Kurenai, Hana, Yugao, and Anko made him blush when they kissed his cheeks and asked him to be careful while Itomi was going to have one of her larger crow summons transport him most of the way, then have some of the lesser ones watch over him until he got settled in Iron Country. So now we have him packing up some things, including some jutsu scrolls from Hiruzen and Makoto, because he was currently leaving 1 week after he turned 10, and once again, his friends were the only ones who got him anything. Anyway, once he finished packing, he was leaving straight from the compound to Fang Country, Iron Country's southern border country, and then begin the journey to Iron Country and its capital. I'll be surprised if they notice I'm gone, Naruto thought absently as he finished packing up his things and went out to the living room where the people he counted as friends were waiting for him with sad expressions. So I guess you're leaving now, right? Makoto asked, and Naruto nodded with a small smile before he gave her a hug. Yeah, but don't worry, I'll be back in a few years, he stated with a grin only to be poked in the back, and he turned to see Sarada there with her arms crossed. You'd better be, Sarada stated, pouting, making the others laugh before Naruto hugged each of them and gave Sarada, Kurenai, Hana, Anko, and Yugao a kiss to the cheek, making them blush before he left with Itomi. Once they were in a secure area, Naruto turned to Itomi. Can you deliver this when it's time, please? He asked, giving her a scroll, and Itomi nodded and called a large crow. Naruto then kissed Itomi's cheek before hopping on her waiting summons before flying off, well off to make my destiny, Naruto thought as he rode the crow to Fang Country while Itomi waited till the time was right to deliver the scroll. Hours later, it took Naruto 4 hours to reach Fang, and the crow, named Kara, was kind enough to carry him to the border of Iron Country before leaving, and 2 smaller crows came and settled on Naruto's shoulders as he walked across the border heading for the capital, which in it of itself was a long journey, but it wouldn't be worth it if it was easy, since he assumed that the trip there was a way to prove himself. Around 12 hours later, Naruto made it to a large mountain that looked like a mushroom and began to scale it using his chakra and muscles. 6 hours into that, he made to the top to see an older gentleman with robes marked with the rank of general standing there with a raised eyebrow as Naruto panted, "My name is Naruto. I came here to learn from the greatest swordsman and become the best." Naruto panted out, trying to not collapse, which wasn't easy since he ran low on chakra an hour ago and climbed the rest of the way on pure grit and will. The general, named Mifune, examined the boy before him and noted the bloodied fingers. "You climbed up here with your bare hands?" he asked incredulously, and Naruto nodded, surprising Mifune and his small group that were behind him, who Naruto missed from the exhaustion. "I used chakra until I had nothing but my muscle left, then it was just my will to make it, since I had to do it on my own no matter what," he stated, still panting as he tried to stay standing but his legs were shaking. "Impressive," Mifune stated, since it was difficult for an adult to get up the mountain, but for a child to do it, and the fact he was doing so to become better made him more impressive. Before he could make another comment, Naruto passed out and Mifune had one of his soldiers carry him to one of the hotels. Next day, the next morning had Mifune and one of his captains, a man named Mihawk, walking to the room Naruto was resting in, only to hear grunts of exertion coming from within. Being curious, they opened to the door to see Naruto doing vertical push-ups while having weights connected to his legs. They were impressed, as many adults couldn't do this exercise, and here was a boy not even in his teens doing it as if he'd been doing it for years. Unknown to them, he had been. "I can see why you were interested, Mifune-sama," Mihawk stated, as he hadn't seen one so young be so dedicated to his training, and it was even more astounding he was doing this after climbing the mountain the day before. Mifune merely nodded. "Yes, if he's this dedicated now, I can only imagine what he will be like when older," Mifune stated before Naruto noticed them there and stopped before releasing the weights with a dull thud before sealing them into a scroll and faced the two. "Can I help you?" Naruto asked, trying to be polite and civil since they were nice enough to give him a room, plus they'd hopefully be training him. "Come with me, young man, there is a few things I'd like to talk to you about. Mifune stated, motioning Naruto to come with him. Alright, Naruto stated as he got his shoes on before going with the two to a more regal building where several individuals with different swords were training along with a couple of others. When they saw Mifune, they all stopped and bowed to him before looking at Naruto, who was showing no fear even with the stares from a few who had a more predatory gaze. Good day all of you, this is the boy I was telling you about. Mifune stated, making them raise their eyebrows, and Naruto gave a slight bow of respect, but they saw it was not of submission, making him go up a notch in their book, putting him at notch 1. Hello, my name is Naruto. I have 2 clan names, but only one holds any real significance to me. Naruto informed, making a few raise an eyebrow at that. What is your full name? One of the others, a guy with green hair and 3 swords, asked, and Naruto frowned slightly. My full name is Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze, but I only care about the Uzumaki part of my name. He stated, and they widened their eyes at the Uzumaki name more than the Namikaze name. You're related to the Red Death. A man with red hair and a cross scar on his cheek asked, and Naruto sighed and nodded. Yeah, she's my mother, not like she treats me like it though. Naruto stated, bitterly, getting their attention even more. Why not? Another with blonde hair and a cigarette that was doing leg exercises asked. Naruto scoffed, she's too busy focusing on my siblings. Naruto stated angrily, for 5 years both of my parents ignored me and only focused on my siblings, and then when I learned to walk vertically they flipped out and Kushina actually slapped me for it. So now I've broken ties with them and will be my own self in Uzumaki. He stated angrily, since he was going to be the greatest Uzumaki to ever live and take the clan to great heights once he learned how to become clan head of the Uzumaki. He broke from his musings by Mifune speaking, well young one, you must have a lot of heart and courage to scale the mountain as you did, and he fact you have a fire in your eyes when you spoke about becoming stronger and the greatest is a good testament to your will. With that in mind, you may stay here for a month, and if you show promise then you may stay here and learn as long as you wish. Your teachers will be myself and any who wish to teach you, but be warned that we will not go easy on you, as the life of a swordsman is not easy and we will require dedication and willingness to continue on through it all. He stated seriously while looking Naruto in the eye, and Naruto just stared back at him with absolute confidence and will to be the best. I accept, sensei. Naruto stated seriously, giving a respectful bow, making the swordsman and others smile. Now the training could begin. 1 month later, Naruto was taking a few breaths as he was working on a technique called cutting nothing, that his sensei Mahokan Senpai Zoro, the green-haired man with 3 swords from when he met the others, were teaching him. He was getting the hang of it, but was struggling since it was considered a more advanced technique, and the fact he had to control himself and his sword to the point that he could only cut when he wanted to cut wasn't helping. His teachers were saying he was making progress, but Naruto wanted to be even better, which was why he planned to try out shadow clones soon to help increase his training. He mentally reminded himself to thank Itomi for teaching him that, since it was helpful for chores, and he planned to try out the training aspect. Unknown to Naruto, there were several of the other swordsmen paying attention to him since he showed such grit and determination in his training, since he'd trained till he could barely stand, and the minute he had his energy back he would return to training and wouldn't try to learn anything new until he mastered what he already knew. Such dedication and focus was rare in one so young, and it only made them more interested. Meanwhile, the Namikaze family were having a normal meal with Jiraiya, Tsunade, Kakashi, and Shizune, not having noticed anything different, except for Shizune of course, until the young female Namikaze, named Kiwon, spoke up, "Oh. Tusen, Kasen, our teacher wanted to know where Naruto was, have you seen him?" She asked, making them all stop as they, minus Shizune, began to realize they hadn't seen Naruto in a while. Trying to hide their panic, Minato and Kushina quickly moved to their eldest, room only to freeze as they realized that they hadn't been in there before and tried to push down the sense of foreboding while not noticing the others had joined them. Minato opened the door and found the place covered with dust while it was sparsely decorated as all that was there was a chair, bed, and desk with nothing else at all. Naturally, this shocked everyone but Shizune before. Minato noticed a scroll on the desk and felt fear rush through him as he went to it and noticed it was dated a month ago, making his heart sink as he opened it and read before his eyes widened as tears flowed down his face and he fell to his knees while punching the desk repeatedly till he finally broke it, shocking everyone before the scroll fell from his hand and rolled to the others with Kushina picking it up and the others read it, widening their eyes as they did. To whoever finds this first, by the time you've read this, I will be long gone to a place I know won't neglect me when I want to train, won't choose someone else to train instead of me just because they feel they may need more training for a stupid reason, and won't get angry at me and berate me for learning something on my own. I am forsaking the Namikaze name and will now be an Uzumaki only and will not return unless I deem it necessary. If you are wondering why my room looks this way, it's because I haven't been living at the house since I was 7 and have stayed with those that I consider my actual family and friends and kept the few things they gave me since I was never given anything by my so-called family or god relatives after the age of 5. If you are hoping that if I come back, you can claim you noticed I was gone right away, you can forget that because I had a seal on the letter that triggers when you opened it, so I know exactly when you opened it and know how long it took you to finally realize I was gone. If I had to guess, I would say at least 3 weeks, and it wasn't even any of you that noticed I was gone but someone who couldn't help but notice, such as one of the academy instructors. Hope you all enjoy the life you clearly wanted, one without me in it. Signed, Naruto Uzumaki. Everyone was shocked at what they read and Kushina dropped to her knees, shocked at how her oldest child felt and was starting to feel like shit for how she acted. The others did as well except for Shizune, for obvious reasons, and Tsunade since this was the first time being at their home in over a year, and as we stated before, she rarely saw the triplets as it was, so there was no absence for her to notice. Today she just assumed Naruto was at a friend's house since he had mentioned he ate meals with friends during his visits to her, which at times were months of time between. However, she was feeling a strong emotion right now, and it was anger. Anger at Jiraiya for neglecting their oldest godson, anger at Kakashi and Minato for doing exactly what they preached against, meaning showing favoritism, the siblings for not being there for their brother, and mostly at Kushina for daring to go against Uzumaki laws, rules, and principles by basically abandoning her child, clansman, and the rightful heir to the Uzumaki. Tsunade glared at Kushina and slapped her across the face before leaving with Shizune in tow, while Minato quickly had Kakashi go and get Anbu to try and track Naruto, futile as it was since the trail would be a month old. 3 months later, Naruto stood facing a muscled youth with white GI pants, bandages around his lower legs and feet, and slipper-style sandals, and both were panting and covered in bruises. This was Sanosuke Sagara, a taijutsu fighter nicknamed the Steel Wall, since that's what it felt like to hit him, and the fact that he could take life-threatening injuries and keep going. Naruto was training in his style of fighting after learning the personal close combat style of his third sword teacher Saito Hajime after Naruto learned the different styles of the sword art Gatatsu. Naruto's natural brawler style is what attracted Sanosuke, since he fought pretty much the same way, and since he had a lightning-fast way of fighting due to Saito, Sanosuke decided Naruto needed a style that would let him take numerous hits and still keep going, plus it would let him train harder in his sword training if he could take more hits without having to stop. Once Naruto finished training with Sanosuke, he was going to train with a pair of people named Edward Kenway and Shay Cormac, who were both elite swordsmen but also stealth, tracking, assassination, and long-range experts, and he was going to learn their multiple methods and combat styles, since Edward used 2 swords and Shay used a sword and dagger combo. Naruto had also began to successfully use shadow clones to train faster and more effectively, while mentally thanking Itomi for teaching him the jutsu, but each time he got a new sensei he'd train with them solo first for at least a month, then he'd work with shadow clones since he wanted to show that he was taking things seriously and not just trying to rush through everything. Now, don't go thinking he had mastered everything from his other teachers, heck no, but he was having clones train in them and make sure he had them down easily and would then work on being flawless and effective with them all before he moved to new attacks, stances, and the like. He was working harder this month than the others since Mihawk had informed him that in 2 months' time they would be going to Uzu to see if anything remained there that Naruto could learn or use. Naruto was excited, naturally, and hoped there would be things even Kushina didn't know since he planned to remove her and her children from the Uzumaki clan if he was able to become the Uzumaki clan head. Another thing on his mind was he still needed to find what sword was his ideal sword. He had styles for katanas and zanbatos, but the swords didn't resonate with him and he was trying to find one that did while also keeping his skills with the other blades, since if he found himself without his ideal blade then he'd be stuck with an unfamiliar weapon and that could lead to his death. Naruto shook his head to clear those thoughts since he had plenty of time to worry about that and resumed his training with Sanosuke, which was essentially the two beating the hell out of each other. 2 months later, in the land of whirlpools, Naruto, now looking more fit and carrying a pair of wakizashis to get used to their feel and weight since he began training with another warrior named Aoshi Shimamori along with his other teachers and it was coming along well. His training with Sanosuke was to the point Naruto was learning to use the Fute no Kiwami or double layer limit, which was a powerful and destructive ability that could cause damage on the scale of Tsunade's punches without the strength behind them. With his swordsman senseis he had already mastered half the techniques they wanted to show him and get him to learn, and he was working on making his own and learning some advanced moves. The main two he was having difficulty with were the hidden Mitsurugi and Gatatsu since both required great leg and arm strength to do the fast motions and cutting, stabbing power. At present, Naruto, Mihawk, and Naruto's next taijutsu sensei named Sanji were in Whirlpool to begin looking around and training. Naruto felt strange there as even though it was destroyed, his mind could envision it in its prime with various civilians, merchants, shinobi, and samurai walking the streets going about their daily lives. It actually pulled at something inside him and he decided to check the clan head, cage tower in the center of the village. Mihawk and Sanji merely took in the sights and let Naruto look around as they set up somewhere for them to camp as they didn't know how long they'd be there. Back with Naruto, he entered the tower which was still in good shape and found himself heading for the office and looking around to see many skeletal remains of different shinobi wearing headbands not from Uzu or Konoha, and it was only one with an Uzu headband for every 15 or so that had a different headband. It was a clear testament to how strong his clan was during the height of their power, and it made Naruto happy to know his clan was made of hard-working powerful people since they were only one clan and had made a village that could be on par with Konoha and the other great villages. Upon reaching the office, Naruto found a mountain of bodies and one skeleton wearing cage robes sitting in the cage chair, which Naruto assumed meant that the person defeated all the enemies that came for him before succumbing to his wounds. Naruto then looked around the office before finding a picture that was hanging wrong and moved it to find a safe with a seal over it that Naruto knew as a blood seal. Shrugging to himself, Naruto cut his finger and put blood on the seal, making it glow before it faded away, and unlocked the safe, causing the door to open and show a blade and large scroll resting inside the safe. Taking the blade, he unsheathed it and found it was a straight-backed kukri sword that had seals inscribed on the handle and blade, and Naruto felt a connection to it and gave it a few test swings and noticed it seemed to hum when he swung it in a certain direction but stopped as soon as he moved it. He frowned in confusion before he resheathed it and put the scabbard across his back before taking the scroll. As he unrolled it on the desk, which was somehow still intact, he read from the last cage, "To whoever finds this, I pray to Kami that you are an Uzumaki, as I do not wish for our enemies or those who would exploit us to find the treasures you now hold." The sword is one of 3 weapons that have served the Uzumaki since its founding and is one of the determining factors of being the clan head of the Uzumaki. The sword's name is Orcrist the Strong Cleaver, and its mates are within the village waiting for those worthy to find them and will most assuredly lead you if you are a pure-blooded Uzumaki and are strong enough to wield them properly. I was not strong enough, kind enough, or wise enough to be the clan head, but I was still made cage and did not fight to become the clan head, as only the items can pick who is to lead our clan. One item will judge your soul and another will judge your ambitions and goals to see if you are worthy, while the weapons will test your strength, both of your heart, mind, and body. Only the true leader of the Uzumaki has the strength of mind, body, and heart while having the pure soul and good intentions for the Uzumaki. The scroll you found is the entire history of the Uzumaki since its founding, along with every jutsu the Uzumaki have created, the weapon styles designed, and how to bring out the bloodlines of our clan to their strongest potential through training, practice, and perseverance, as every Uzumaki does. Our religious practices, beliefs, cooking, culture, festivals, and more that our clan honored, cherished, and kept sacred are within as well and must be protected. The scroll also details every notable Uzumaki that has come from the clan, regardless of if they were exiled from the clan or not. Please, even if you are not the clan head, protect the scroll and keep our clan's history and culture alive for the next generation to learn and practice. Never let the whirlpool stop raging. Menma Uzumaki, Uzukage of the village hidden in the whirlpools. Naruto read and smiled, seeing how feared and dedicated his clan was to preserving their history and culture for the others, and began looking at the rest of the scroll. Further in the scroll was the seal that contained the history of the Uzumaki dating back to within 100 years after the Sage of Six Paths, and mentioned all the notable clansmen that came to be over the centuries up to when the Uzumaki were nearly wiped out with whirlpool. Naruto sealed the scroll away for later and then left the tower with his new sword out to guide him where the item attracting it was. An hour later had him at what appeared to be a barracks of some kind that was still in decent shape. Upon entering it, he found piles of corpses from the attackers and a small number of scattered Uzumaki defenders. Naruto walked past saying prayers for the dead before entering the captain's quarters and found a strong box under the desk that had the captain sitting in front of it. Naruto moved the captain gently before taking the box out and broke the lock and opened it, finding a short sword that was just under 22 inches long on the blade with a curved-up crossguard, a grooved silver pommel, and a leather-wrapped spiral handle. The short sword, like Storm Cleaver, had seals engraved on it, and he could make out an inscription that the seals made, Asharn, the lighting blade. Naruto strapped the blade to his waist and pointed Orcrist around in different directions looking for the hum, but the blade remained still. Frowning in confusion, he sheathed it before a thought occurred to him. He looked at Asharn and pulled it out and pointed it in different directions before feeling it hum, and left the barracks to follow it while mentally making a note to send some clones here to bury the dead. Another 2 hours of walking later, Naruto came upon what he assumed was the clan head cage home, if the reinforced walls and dozens upon dozens of ruined seals were anything to go by, and entered before looking around. Upon finding the office, Naruto looked around, finding papers and books thrown everywhere and a rusted bastard sword hanging on the wall, and Sting was reacting to it. Shrugging to himself, Naruto sheathed Sting and approached the sword, and upon grasping the handle, the seals engraved on it glowed before the rust fell from the blade like it was nothing but dust, and revealed a shimmering silver blade. Upon the crossguard were seals that made another inscription, Glamdring, the Thunder Hammer. Naruto looked around the office and found a scabbard for the blade and strapped it on his back just under Orcrist before looking around some more to find anything else of use or important. Finding everything that was useful, Naruto saw it was getting dark and decided to find his teachers, who were setting up camp in the middle of the village. Upon arriving, they instantly noticed the weapons on Naruto, and Mihawk smiled. "I see that the coming here wasn't a waste," Mihawk stated, and Naruto nodded. "Yeah, and there is still more for me to find here, so we may be here a while. Naruto stated, making Mihawk nod as Sanji gave them soup before they ate quietly before turning in for the night. The next day, Naruto continued to explore the village for any signs or clues on what he was looking for or where he should look. It was nearly noon when he came upon what looked like an old temple and decided to look inside since there was an item supposed to judge his soul. He scowled slightly, seeing the bodies of attackers and those in Uzumaki robes that resembled priest garments, and said another prayer over them before continuing to explore, while mentally noting to send out shadow clones that night to begin burying the bodies, even the enemy shinobi, since he wasn't going to disrespect the dead regardless of how he felt about them. As he finished that thought, he felt a pull towards the main room and followed it to find a statue of an Uzumaki, evidenced by the Uzumaki spiral being engraved on the forehead, wearing robes and holding a shakuho staff and wearing a rosary of black magnetama and crimson Uzumaki spirals with a large black and red Uzumaki spiral at the end. The interesting thing was that both the staff and rosary weren't part of the statue, but placed on in it to secure them. Naruto idly wondered how the hell no one took them before he paused in thought and drew Orcrist and re-examined the seals on it. He found what he was looking for etched into the hilt so small that unless you looked for it you would miss it. It was a reverse summoning seal. If anyone not of Uzumaki blood tried to use it and was deemed unworthy, then the blade would reverse summon itself back into the safe Naruto took it from, and even if there was Uzumaki blood, if deemed unworthy, the blade wouldn't work except as a blunt object. Testing a theory, Naruto found the same kind of seal etched onto Asharn and Glamdring, though he guessed they went to different locations to ensure no one could hide all three from any surviving Uzumaki, and assumed the same was for the staff and rosary. Naruto made a mental note to swipe some blood on the reverse seals to see if they would activate and make the weapon return to him instead of here in Whirlpool, since it would be troublesome to keep coming back and getting them if someone else tried to use them. Naruto then looked at the statue and bowed to it. Please protect these items. I will not desecrate something sacred to my clan just to gain something from it. Naruto stated before turning to leave, only to feel a weight on his neck and something in his hand, and sure enough, as soon as he looked, he was wearing the rosary and holding the staff. He turned back to the statue and saw the hands were now together in a prayer or a sign of respect, with the head bowed, and he bowed towards it again. I will honor these items and the Uzumaki clan rights so long as I shall live. He stated as he sealed the staff in his arm and walked out of the temple with the rosary sizing itself to fit him better. Naruto walked out and sighed slightly. He had most of what he needed to be the Uzumaki clan head, but being recognized as such was another matter entirely. He knew if worst came to worst he'd have to enact the Clan Survival Act, which was a law created by the first Hokage, and subsequently picked up by all the other villages, that if the last member of a clan was considered underage and took the clan head seat, then they had to be 16 and have one wife by the time they were 18 to continue the clan's legacy and bloodline. The first part was easy, but finding a wife in 2 years after he took the head position would be another matter entirely, and that was if he was done training by the age of 16. Naruto shook those thoughts away and quickly made several hundred clones, who nodded and began gathering the dead while 20 went to find a clearing to bury them in. While they did that, Naruto went about looking through the village for what was left to prove him worthy of being the Uzumaki clan head. He wandered for most of the day, only stopping when Sanji tracked him down and made him eat, as he wanted to find the last item before they were done on the island. Naruto knew he could get a week to stay here, but any longer would be harder, and he wanted to have the security now if he could have it rather than have to come back and take more time away. He'd rather come back here some time for the peace and quiet and pay his respects rather than because he wanted something from the land. He paused a moment as he felt something call to him for a minute there and looked around trying to determine where it was coming from, and finally pinpointed it at the island's mountain. Shrugging to himself, he took off towards the mountain, making some more clones to help out the others as he found several remains still scattered everywhere. Upon reaching the mountain, Naruto began looking over the area around it, having guessed that the mountain was where the civilians were to evacuate to when an attack came. 20 minutes of searching led to him finding a seal carved into a small unassuming rock, and he activated, making a cavern entrance appear with torches lighting themselves down the cavern. Naruto quickly entered and followed the tunnel, feeling the call get stronger now the deeper he went. Naruto arrived at the vast cavern, looking on in sadness at the bodies of the various civilians, ninja, and invaders, and quickly made several hundred clones to begin taking the bodies up while another popped so the clones preparing the graves would know to dig more. As his clones began doing their job, Naruto began looking around, and an hour of searching, as the cavern was that large, Naruto found a small patch of dirt that was more disheveled than the rest and quickly wiped some away, revealing a small box. Naruto pulled it out and opened it, showing an onyx band with a ruby on top, but the interesting thing was that the onyx flowed up, making the spirals in the ruby, and the ruby flowed down, making vein-like designs in the onyx. Naruto slipped it on his right middle finger and felt a power wash over him, and the ruby glowed a moment before it faded, and Naruto sighed, "You don't accept me, huh? Very well. Then I shall carry you till you find someone who is." Naruto stated as he slipped the ring off and put it in his pocket. Naruto trudged back to the campsite and sighed, making the other two look at him. "Something wrong, Naruto?" Sanji asked as he cooked their dinner. "The last item of the Uzumaki clan head rejected me, so I can't be clan head," Naruto stated, making them raise an eyebrow. "You can still be clan head. Who cares if the item didn't accept you, the others did," Sanji stated, and Naruto shook his head, not noticing the ring began to glow again. "I don't want to just take the title, I want to fully earn the right and title. Anything else is a sham and insult to my goals and dreams. Even if I can't banish her and her children from the Uzumaki, I will still refuse to be under the same name as them, as they broke key Uzumaki tenets and creeds and my own views and code for life. Anything less than earning the right she claims to have without going through the proper procedures makes me no better than she is, and I refuse to stoop to her level and betray the very foundations my clan is built on just to get a shot at her. I will either find another way to get her out of the clan, or I will simply build my own and return these items to rest here in Uzu for all time, where no one will ever disturb them again," Naruto stated before he blinked and saw the ring back on his finger and the ruby glowing brightly, making him smile. "But it looks like it won't come to that," he stated, gazing at the ring. "With this I am marked as the true heir and leader of the Uzumaki clan," Naruto stated, making a fist, feeling the ring flood his mind with knowledge of his clan and their laws. Mihawk and Sanji merely smirked as Sanji served the food. "Yes, well, your lordship, it's time to eat," Sanji stated jokingly, making Naruto open his eyes and smirk as they sat down and ate, with Naruto now having the security and knowledge he needed to get back at the family who wronged him and punish the people who betrayed the clan and all it stood for. 5.5 years later, capital of Iron Country. Clang, 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 came from the training area of the capital as a now 16-year-old Naruto clashed against Saito Hajime, Kenshin Mimura, and Mihawk with his own blades, and right now Orcrist was out as it was his most fluid blade. Naruto had gone through some changes over the past few years, as he was 6 feet 3 inches and all muscle with a 6-pack turning 8-pack forming on his torso. His hair was longer, reaching the base of his neck, and was slicked back save for one strand that hung between his eyes, and some of his strands had red tips. He still wore the rosary around his neck and was currently shirtless as he fought his primary senseis in a pair of black GI pants and sandals. Around the area were the various warriors that had trained Naruto over the years, counting Mifune, and among them were some of their most legendary warriors such Cloud Strife, Sephiroth, Li Mubai, Altair ibn Lahad, Ezio Auditore, Connor Kenway, Zir Zero, Squall Leonhardt, Geralt of Rivia, Aoshi Shimamori, Sosuke Aizen, Seijuro Hiko, Kenpachi Zaraki, Anakin Skywalker, a man named Only Jack, a large red-head nicknamed the Scotsman, and more. All of them had a hand in training Naruto at some point or another and could honestly say they'd never had a better student, and it was also a little scary how good he had become in just over 6 years of training with them and how many different styles he learned. Naturally, they weren't the only ones that were watching, since Naruto had attracted the attention of several women in the Land of Iron just being himself, and the women were ready to go with him wherever he may go, with one already being his betrothed. The lady girl in question was one Rukia Kuchiki, as the two had known each other since he was training under her father Byakuya to learn their speed techniques that were on par with Kenshin's hidden Mitsurugi, though another of Naruto's girls was even better at the speed technique than any Kuchiki and was only matched by Naruto, and the two had started as rivals until that grew to friendship and then furthered as any old love story went. The interesting thing was that Rukia was the one who wanted Naruto to date other girls, since she was friends with the ones she had met and didn't want them heartbroken, and apparently she liked the idea of having a husband that could handle multiple women and still be ready for more fun. Byakuya was against it first, but when he was caught in a situation with Naruto having his sword at his throat and Rukia having hers at his manhood, along with the other women in position to harm him in ways only Jiraiya could probably sympathize with, he made the intelligent decision of stating that so long as his daughter was happy, then that was all that mattered. Since then he had been getting to know each woman, but at the moment Rukia was the only one he was to wed. Back to the other things. Naruto had mastered each skill his teachers had to give him, including Edward, Shay, Ezio, Altair, and Connor's stealth, assassination, and tool skills to make sure he would be an effective shinobi as well as swordsman. He also got trained by some monks of Fire Temple that traveled at Mifune's request, and they taught him to fight with his shakuho as well as their own form of hand-to-hand combat to add to his repertoire of skills. The monks were very eager to help him, since apparently the only other monks they respected as much as they did the samurai were the Uzumaki clan monks, who gave them the basis for their faith and practices. Naturally, this made Naruto even more eager to learn from them, and they were impressed and amazed at his dedication, restraint, and discipline, since it was something unseen in anyone, let alone one not even to the age of 16. One major benefit he gained from them was learning to fight without his eyes, so he had one advantage over any enemies that came after him with the intent to blind him. Back to the fight, the three master swordsmen were actually having to work to gain any ground, as Naruto proved he was worthy of his nickname, the Sage of Swords, as he had quick grasp of any blade he picked up and could be swinging it with little to no difficulty within hours without using shadow clones. As a result, it was very hard to attack him with a move he hadn't already mastered, learned a counter for, or learned to dodge while turning it to his advantage. For instance, when Saito would come in with a Gatatsu thrust, Naruto would duck at the last second and grab Saito's sword arm and slam him into the ground before dodging, as Kenshin or Mihawk would come in to ensure Saito wasn't taken out of the fight. For Kenshin, certain hidden Mitsurugi moves needed him to take a step in advance, and Naruto would strike at that moment and keep him from getting firm footing for the attack and begin his own barrage of attacks with the other two moving to help. For Mihawk, it was a matter of redirecting, countering, blocking, or engaging him in close combat with his blades like he wasn't fighting as a swordsman, which threw Mihawk off slightly. At the moment, Saito was a bit scuffed up. Mihawk had some cuts in his clothes and a bruise on the right side of his face from a vicious right hook from Naruto, and Kenshin had cuts and tears in his kimono, and all three were panting while Naruto stood with Orcrist pointed towards the sky in front of his face and didn't seem to be breathing hard at all. It was clear to everyone that they had basically made an unbeatable swordsman, and with his other skills handy he could be a force to reckon with even for S-ranked enemies, which was who he was facing right now. His training with Sano, Kenpachi, the monks, and those like them made him a proverbial steel wall of muscle and nearly unbreakable when in combat. His training with Saito, Aoshi, Kenshin, and Byakuya made him a speed demon. His training with Shay, Edward, Connor, Altair, and Ezio made him a ghost when needed. Sanji and two others gave him an unorthodox method of fighting in hand-to-hand that kept an enemy guessing. Mihawk, the monks, and Mifune gave him focus, discipline, and sharpened him into a prime example of a swordsman while keeping emotions in check, and all of it only piled onto his already impressive stamina, making him able to outlast any opponent, and that wasn't even taking into account the jutsu he learned over the years, both from what he had with him and what he learned from the Uzumaki scrolls. In short, they'd made the perfect fusion of a monk, soldier, samurai, fighter, assassin, ninja, and warrior, and the boy still had years to grow before he hit his prime. It was almost scary how skilled the boy was, and he still wanted to become even greater and surpass every swordsman that had ever lived. They honestly believed he could do it, especially Mifune, since he knew that if Naruto wanted he could have the rank of general within a year if he joined the standing forces of Iron, but he knew Naruto's goals and dreams had him going somewhere else in the world, and he wasn't going to deny a boy he began to see as his own the dream he sought for and craved. Mifune already planned to go to Konoha for the upcoming Chunin exams if Naruto was going to compete, as he wanted to watch with pride as everyone saw the diamond that most of Konoha foolishly neglected and tarnished. He broke from his musings seeing Naruto was getting ready to end it and quickly tapped his cane down on the ground, signaling the end of the fight. "That's enough, I don't need you for getting too serious and someone losing a limb or worse," he called, making them nod before Naruto gave his three senseis a salute, which they all readily returned while the crowd applauded at the show. Naruto sheathed his blade and bowed to Mifune before activating a seal on his arm that put him in a pair of black pants, black boots, a red muscle shirt, and a black cloak with Sage of Swords down the back of it in red, all of which were form-fitting and showed his defined muscles. Naruto then put Orcrist on his back and unsealed Glamdring and a Sharn and strapped them back on his person. Mifune then approached as Mihawk, Kenshin, and Saito moved back to the others. "Naruto, 6 years ago you came to us to become stronger and better yourself. I can state with utmost confidence that we have made you the strongest and the best, but there isn't anything left for you to learn here, and while I would be honored to count you among our forces, that is not where your dreams and goals lie elsewhere. Because of that, we wish you well on your travels and know that you will always have a home and place here should you want it," Mifune stated with a smile fathers had when looking at their child accomplish something. Naruto stood straight and approached Mifune before embracing him like he was family. "Thank you, Mifune Gigi," he stated, making Mifune smile and return the hug before patting him on the shoulder, turned and marched off to continue his duties. Naruto nodded to the others as they either gave him pats on the back, nods of respect, or some other form of respect and caring in their own way. Naruto then felt someone press against his back and rub their hands on his chest. "I guess that's his way of saying he's proud of you," he heard his fiancée Rukia say while pressing her modest C-cup against his back, and he smiled. "Yes. It's also his way of saying that if I ever need help, the army of this country is just a call away," Naruto stated before he turned and captured Rukia's lips in a kiss, making her moan as she wrapped her arms around his neck and deepened the kiss as Naruto moved his hand along her back, sending shivers up her spine. The two separated at a whine and looked to see Naruto's other girls standing there with a pout. Unohana Retsu, Rangaku Matsumoto, Yoruichi Shion, Megumi Takane, Yumiko Magata, Tifa Lockhart, Siri, Triss Marigold, and Yennefer. Rukia and Naruto smirked before he quickly made a group of clones, and each clone took a girl and gave them a passionate kiss that made their legs weak while Naruto kissed Rukia again. After about 5 minutes, the Narutos separated from the girls, leaving them slightly dazed, and he smiled. "Pack your things, we leave in 2 days," he stated, getting them out of their stupor before they nodded and each gave a kiss to his cheek and swayed their hips as they walked to get their things, making Naruto chuckle before he looked at the sky. "Get ready, Konoha, Namakazes, I'm coming back and you're not going to be happy with what I have to say and do," Naruto stated as the wind suddenly picked up and blew in the direction of Konoha. Naruto was going to bring his talent and power to Konoha, and he was going to ensure everyone on his shit list was put on notice and made painfully aware of what they ignored or threw away. He wouldn't kill them, they hadn't earned that punishment, or was it a mercy? Either way, Naruto was going to show them how he grew away from them, away from their support, love, and any possible training they could have thought to give him. He just had to get him and his girls there to see it. Naruto and his girls were walking through the forest surrounding Konoha, with the women taking in the sights since they mostly lived in Iron Country, which was a lot of snow with some pop-ups of spring to enjoy, but not a full forest of summertime trees to see and experience. Naruto merely stared straight ahead towards the ever-nearing gate as they walked, though he did speak to his girls to ensure they didn't worry about him. They all understood why he was like this, of course. He didn't want to go to Konoha for work, but Kiri was too wrapped up in their problems, and Naruto's bloodlines would cause problems potentially on both sides. Iwa would sooner skin him alive, despite the Tsuchikage not being a hard over what happened anymore since shit happened in war. Kumo would try to turn him into a breeding factory and have him expand their operations, and he had no intention of just siring kids and letting them be turned into village weapons. Suna, while friendly with Naruto, wasn't exactly getting a ton of jobs, and Naruto didn't care for the desert, and his girls wouldn't enjoy it much either. Thus, only Konoha was left as a truly viable option for him, since he didn't have the experience and funding to make his own village, and no minor village would risk Konoha turning their attention on them. So it was Konoha or he wasn't getting a shinobi career. All of this meant he had to deal with the people he didn't want to deal with, but the bright side for him was that he could see his other precious people again. He could only imagine their faces when he showed them some of the secrets he had stashed away for when he needed trump cards. He also knew he'd enjoy the faces of Minato and Kushina's family when he returned, and knew they'd be scrambling to apologize and make amends. Yeah, right. The best they could get would be him considering them friends. They burnt that bridge for being family a long time ago, and it was worse still because Kushina and her children broke Uzumaki clan tenets and laws that breaking even just one of them was enough for the head to exile you from the clan, and breaking multiple ones usually ended up in your execution. He wouldn't kill them, but he sure as wasn't letting them stay in the clan. He was the clan head now, and it was his duty to ensure all members were true Uzumaki and followed all the laws to the letter. No excuses, ifs, ands, or buts. He shook those thoughts away as they neared the gate and prepared to check in, while he wondered just what the Hokage and his family were up to. Let's see for ourselves, shall we? Hokage Tower. Minato Namikaze sighed as he sat in his office taking a break from the paperwork. He looked over the village, feeling sad once again, since it had been 6 years since his eldest son had run away from the village. His teams that were sent to find him came back empty-handed, and he was limited to only Fire Country, since sending teams outside would be problematic, as not only would it possibly cause an international incident, but it could alert the other villages that his son was gone. That would have made Naruto a glaring target, whether for assassins or recruiters. It had not gone over well. Tsunade had cut all contact with them along with Shizune, and only ever spoke to them professionally. Sarada and Sasuke Uchiha became colder towards his children and his wife. Makoto became colder towards them all. Yugao and Itomi, who apparently his eldest was friends with, only ever spoke professionally to him, Jiraiya, or Kushina. Hiruzen had even stated how disappointed he was. Kushina and Kiwon had been inconsolable for over a month, refusing to leave their rooms and only eating when they absolutely had to. Arashi had just turned to training like a madman and had become a bit cocky because of it. Jiraiya had sent his spies and toads scouring for him, though he and Minato got their handed to them by the toads for treating the boy like that, since there was no way they couldn't come clean. However, when nothing was found, Jiraiya started being depressed and now rarely left Konoha unless some word of Naruto came, and then he took off to investigate. None of them ever panned out or got them any closer to finding Naruto. He turned back to his paperwork and to one document he had just finished filling out a short while ago. He had sent his wife's team consisting of her and Kakashi as the senseis since Kushina had duties to attend to in council meetings at times, so Kakashi was there to continue teaching them and had Kiwon, Arashi, and Yakumo Kurama as their students. They were teamed with Itomi's team consisting of Sasuke, Sarada, and Sakura Haruno. Their mission was to escort a bridge builder named Tazuna to Wave Country and then possibly keep him alive as he finished the bridge connecting Wave to the mainland. He knew that Wave was in bigger trouble than the old man let on, mostly due to a ruthless businessman named Gato, but Minato was confident that with his wife and 2 Anbu-level ninja that there wouldn't be too many problems since Gato was a thug with more thugs no highly trained warriors. However, he couldn't shake the feeling that there was going to be more trouble than he or they anticipated, but he had no one to spare to send as extra support just to be safe. It wasn't like he couldn't justify it. Wave, while small, was worth a country 3 times its size in economic value, with it being a major trade hub. Minato sighed, not sure what to do as he contemplated things until he was forced out by his secretary getting his attention. "Hokage-sama, there is a young man to see you. He doesn't have an appointment, but you're technically free for the next hour or so," she stated, knowing he usually used this time for paperwork and review. Minato frowned in thought before deciding a break would be fine. "It's alright, Maya, please send him in," Minato stated, getting an affirmative before the door opened a minute later, making Minato freeze in shock. The man standing before him stood in a pair of black pants, black boots, a red muscle shirt, fingerless black gloves, a belt with some pouches, and a black cloak that seemed to almost be part of his body with how snug they were. On his waist was a scabbard with an oddly formed sword. However, it was his head that shocked Minato. Crystal blue eyes, 3 whisker marks on each cheek, sun-kissed blonde hair with red tips that was pulled back into a small ponytail, tan skin, regal-looking face, and little to no baby fat at all, and Naruto. Minato stuttered out as the man in front of him looked at him with indifference. "Hello, Hokage-sama, it's been a while. Before you attempt it, do not hug me and treat me like nothing has happened before I left. I am here simply because there was no other real option for me to become a ninja, and no, I won't call you father," Naruto stated calmly, and Minato flinched and looked saddened. "But, this is your home, you belong here," Minato stated, and Naruto merely looked at him as if asking, "Is that seriously the best you got? I choose where I belong. I am only here because Kumo would try to turn me into a breeding machine, Iwa would probably try to skin me alive and then make me into a breeding machine. I don't care for the desert, so Suna is out, and I could have gone to Kiri to help them settle that civil war mess, but by the time I got there it would most likely be over, and there is the cost of going there in addition to actually getting there and getting the rebels to trust me. And if the rebels lost, then I'd have to fight the entire village to get away. I would have built my own village if I had the necessary land, experience, candidates, and finances, but I lack the experience in leading large groups as I've only led squads before and don't have the resources, so that was out. And no minor village would take in the son of a cage since it would draw a lot of attention, both beneficial and hostile, to them. Thus, I had little option left if I wanted to have a ninja career than to come to Konoha. It's as simple as that, Hokage-sama, and nothing more," Naruto stated calmly, making Minato sigh sadly. I see," he stated, not wanting to push matters right now, especially since it would just cause a bigger rift between him and his eldest. It didn't help matters that Naruto could just leave if he did push, since there wasn't anything to stop him. Minato couldn't arrest him or anything since he hadn't done anything wrong. He certainly wasn't going to have a Yamanaka wipe his mind or something horrible like that, which some of the more zealot shinobi would suggest, and he definitely couldn't have someone following him constantly to keep tabs on him, especially if Naruto found out and things got violent. It was also a matter of Minato would need the rest of his family to talk and try to convince Naruto to stay. and he knew Kushina would kill him if he tried to convince Naruto and failed while she was gone. Basically, his only option right now was to suck it up and hope he could start mending the damage that was done. He broke from his inner musings as Naruto spoke. Good, now while I'm sure you'd have a skills drill and exam to see what rank I should have, I am fine with genin rank. Anything higher than that would be seen as favoritism being shown, whether because I'm your son and you overbelieve in my skills or because you gave me the rank just to make me more considerate to staying here and trying to make things right, as you no doubt would put it. So I'll take genin rank, and I'm sure the Jonin senseis were assigned already, so I'll just be a floater helping out different teams and the like until such time as a team opens up, a new team can be formed, or I prove the point that I can be solo and be fine. Naruto stated, since he wasn't going to have anything handed to him or let someone accuse him of getting something handed to him. Minato sighed slightly, knowing he is right. It was why, despite knowing his other two children were Chunin level, they still had to be genin. Minato could also tell his son had trained long and hard just based on his stance alone and the fact he kept looking where all the hidden Anbu were without even trying to find them. He'd like nothing more than to test him to see what he was capable of, but it would appear he didn't want to be anything higher than a genin even if he was Chunin level or higher. Very well. He stated before digging in one of the lower drawers and pulling out a headband, since the Hokage was required to keep some on hand in case they managed to get a missing nin to join the village or they got a defector. Naruto took the headband before undoing his ponytail and tied the headband around his head, pushing his bangs out of his eyes and letting his mop of blonde hair fall around his head just above his shoulders. The only reason he kept his hair this length was because his girls all had a thing for running their hands through it during makeout sessions, and his only issue with that was that it would get in his face at times and distract him. Now that he had a headband, he didn't have to worry about it as much, especially since he could turn it into a bandana if the headband wasn't as effective as he would like. Before either of them could say anything else, a Chunin rushed in with a scroll in hand. Hokage-sama. Urgent message from Kakashi. The Chunin stated as he quickly gave the scroll to Minato, who opened it and read the contents before cursing. Damn it. Naruto, I know you just got here, but you're all that I can spare at the moment for backup. Minato stated, and Naruto shifted his stance to show he was being serious. I need you to head towards the land of waves and provide backup for teams 6 and 7. They've encountered some extra resistance than we were anticipating and want backup just in case. Minato informed, and Naruto nodded. Alright, I'll take 2 companions of mine to help since there could be medical injuries and one of them is a skilled medic. Naruto stated, and Minato nodded, though he wanted to question about his companions, and dismissed him right before he disappeared from where he was standing, shocking the 2 people still there. Minato then shook his head and looked back at the Chunin. I want to be informed the moment any other available ninja arrive back in Konoha, no exceptions and no excuses. Inform the gate guards that all returning shinobi are to report to me immediately until further notice. He ordered, and the Chunin nodded and left to deliver the orders. Minato sighed as he looked back at the scroll. The 2 teams had been met with an ambush of around 50 bandits, with the last one alive telling them that Gato had apparently hired some extra muscle in the form of missing nin. One of whom was apparently Zabuza Momochi, and if he had enough help, especially with bandits aiding, then he could pose a threat. Minato believed in his children, student, and wife, but they weren't invincible, and he wasn't taking a chance, and neither were they. He just hoped Naruto and his 2 companions would be enough to help them until he could find someone to send to help further. With Naruto, said swordsman entered the hotel his girls were at while he went to see his ex-father and quickly told them the situation before having Unohana and Triss go with him while the others waited here. Once the 2 were ready, he and they took off, with Triss using her unique bloodline to keep up with the 2 sword-wielding individuals. At their speed, it took them roughly an hour to reach the teams, and the sight was not one that inspired confidence. Kushina was trapped in a water prison. Kakashi was struggling against a trio of water clones. Itomi was facing 5 water clones and 2 Chunin-ranked ninja called the Demon Brothers, and the genin were facing more bandits and trying to keep Tazuna safe. He also noted how his former family members had changed. Kushina was still the same with her wearing Anbu-style gear without the sword, and it was customized into a vest instead of a chest plate, but he knew the vest was reinforced. Kakashi has aged a bit, but he could also see that Kakashi was slacking in his training since he was an S-rank Anbu commander and now he was struggling against an A-rank missing nin. Arashi had become nearly identical to Minato, counting the somewhat skinny build, only he had his mother's eyes and hair color instead of his father's. He was dressed in a blue long-sleeved shirt, black shorts, and the usual blue sandals with his headband tied around his left bicep. He also had a kunai holster on his left leg. Kiwon was the opposite in that she was a near clone of her mother but had her father's hair color and eyes. She was dressed in a red kimono top with a normal black vest over it, black tights, and blue sandals. Her headband was on her forehead while she had her kunai pouch on her right hip. Naruto then turned his attention to the 2 girls and saw one girl he recalled as Yakumo Kurama, which made his tenant snort a bit, and recalled she was a genjutsu mistress in the making and assumed she was placed with Kushina and Kakashi because she needed to build up her abilities in other areas. She was pale-skinned, brown-haired, bronze-eyed, and wore a lighter pink battle kimono with a fishnet undershirt, fishnet leggings, and a pair of blue sandals. Her headband was dangling around her throat like a necklace. From what he could see, she had low to mid-C cup, a perky, and slender legs. The other was a pink-haired girl that Naruto hadn't met but found she was a bit cute. Her pink hair was cut short and her headband was on her head almost like a bow, cream-skinned, emerald eyes, and small but kissable lips. She wore a red vest over a fishnet shirt, short pink skirt over a pair of black biker shorts, heeled boots that went to her knees, black gloves, 2 pink elbow sleeves, and 2 emerald stud earrings. Her right hip was also bandaged and had a holster over it, but it wasn't a kunai holster. Her figure wasn't as impressive as some others with her high B low C cup, slim waist, moderate hips, and then her best asset, which was her tight that seemed to be jiggling slightly when she moved. Switching his attention to his friends and loved ones, he smiled seeing they had grown better since his time away. Sasuke has grown up well, standing at 5 feet 10 inches with his hair being in a small ponytail that hung by his shoulders rather than it being up and looking like a duck's. He still had some baby fat to him, but he was lean and fit, showing he had been taking training seriously but not so much that he bulked up and lost speed and control. His attire consisted of a white kimono top with the fish netting sewn in and an Uchiha fan on the back, black fingerless gloves connected to a pair of wrist guards, black pants with a pair of sashes dangling on the front that had the Uchiha symbol on them, and black open-toed boots that went up to his knee. He also had an O-katana in hand ready to fight. Sarada had managed to balance out her natural cuteness with her new womanly body as she sported high C low D cup, a jiggly as, slender legs, cream skin, reddish-black eyes, cute face, and black silky hair that was pulled into a small braid that laid between her shoulder blades. Her attire consisted of a red battle dress with black booty shorts under it, black heeled calf boots, black fingerless gloves, a black choker with a red swirl on it, and her cute red-rimmed glasses that helped push her hair out of her eyes. Her headband was around her right thigh while her kunai pouch was on her left. Itomi had become a gorgeous woman, and if it wasn't for the bit that she inherited her from her father, namely the teardrop marks and angular face, she could pass as Makoto's younger sister or even twin. Her black silky hair was braided into a ponytail that hung over her shoulder while her face was both angelic and intimidating due to the cold expression on her face as she was fighting. Her figure had filled out since Itomi now sported mid to high D cup, slim waist, tight stomach, wide hips, firm, and long legs with just enough muscle to accent her womanly curves. Her attire consisted of a black form-fitting bodysuit with a battle skirt over her and groin, a Jonin vest over her chest, black fingerless gloves, and black high-heeled sandals. Naruto smirked at the last item since Makoto was a bit infamous for being able to fight and do missions in those type of heels and that they doubled as weapons since the heels were refined to a sharp tip. Of course that was also part of the trouble wearing them since if the wearer wasn't in full control and balance the heel would stab into the ground or surface making the wearer have to try and pry themselves free while making noise. Breaking from his musings, he quickly analyzed the situation before deciding on a course of action. Naruto had the two girls go aid the genin while he quickly went through seals and launched a great breakthrough at the water clones and demon brothers, sending them back, causing all the fighting to stop as Naruto appeared before the clones. Naruto stood there with his hand resting lazily on the hilt of Orcrist as he stared at the 8 clones and the 2 Chunin while everyone was staring at him in confusion and caution. I'm afraid I can't allow you to kill these Konoha nin. 3 of them are friends of mine and the others recently became comrades, or I wouldn't have gotten in your way. Naruto stated coolly as he locked eyes with each opponent, making them take a step back unconsciously. Who are you? One of the clones asked, and Naruto smirked before turning and pointing at the back of his cloak, making the clones widen their eyes and take a few steps back as well. What the hell are you doing here? We're nowhere near samurai territory and I've never once crossed Iron Country. One of the clones shouted, sounding intimidated, surprising both the demon brothers, the Konoha nin, the original Zabuza, and the other person Naruto knew was off to the side watching the scene. I just told you, I just joined Konoha, so any fight with Konoha nin is now a problem for me. Naruto stated, turning back and now gripping Orcrist in its scabbarded. Now, will you fall back or do I have to end your existence? Naruto asked before dodging and bisecting a bandit that came up behind him before resheathing his blade in a blink of an eye. Well, I'm waiting. Naruto stated, not bothered at all by the man he just killed as he had quite a few kills to his name while serving Iron Country. The onlookers just gaped at the display since they couldn't even follow the movements he did to commit to the kill, and bandits were backing up, especially when 2 women appeared in front of the genin with one holding a sword and the other having glowing hands. I suggest you leave or I will be forced to handle things my way. Naruto stated, cracking his knuckles audibly, making a few flinch before the demon brothers decided to attack using the chain that was connected to each other via the gauntlets they wore. Naruto merely watched them before he pulled a kunai out and waited till they got close. Once they did, he threw the kunai into the chain with enough force to shove it down to the ground, where it planted itself, forcing the 2 brothers to be yanked towards each other. However, before they could collide with each other, Naruto appeared and did a split kick to their heads, sending them snapping back and pulling the kunai free until Naruto kicked it back down into the ground and spun on it. The purpose of the spin was to deliver a roundhouse to one brother's head and swing him around into the other, forcing the 2 to the ground, where he promptly jumped and landed on their arms that were connected by the chain. Naturally, the arms broke, making the 2 brothers yell in pain before a swift kick to the head each knocked them out. Naruto then turned back to the clones and slowly approached them while dragging his sword out slowly, with the noise being deafening in the area. Once he was in front of the clones, they all gripped their swords tight before coming at him all at once, making him snort in amusement. The first one came with a horizontal swing that Naruto jumped on and quickly beheaded the attacker before flipping and slicing another across the chest. As he landed, Naruto bent backwards to dodge another swing before he stabbed the attacker, and then twisted his sword to do an arch swing that bisected another and spun on his right heel to bring his left foot up in a kick that caught another clone under the chin. Naruto then stepped back to let a cleaving chop land in front of him before he chopped the back of the clone's neck and stabbed behind him, impaling the last clone. The clones all dispersed, leaving Naruto standing there looking at the real Zabuza with boredom evident in his eyes. Naruto then walked casually towards Zabuza, who quickly released Kushina and jumped to the side with his sword at the ready. Naruto just walked across the water to Zabuza and stood in front of him with his sword out to the side while the Konoha nin were gawking both at his display and the two women quickly dispatching the bandits in effective measures. Kushina pulled herself out of the water and quickly moved back to the land since she didn't know who this guy was, but he was certainly better than many Anbu-level shinobi. There was also the fact his sword and the man himself seemed familiar to her, but she couldn't quite place either of them. The Konoha nin, minus Yakumo and Sakura, were feeling the same way about the person and couldn't figure out where they knew him from. They broke from their musings when Zabuza attacked only to have each attack blocked or evaded with ease. Problem with a Zanbato, you can only attack in 4 directions: horizontal, vertical, and the 2 diagonals, which means your attacks are limited and I can easily dodge or counter them. Naruto stated since it was always an issue of Zanbatos to have limited ability to attack even if you could gain speed with it. Zabuza grit his teeth since usually his speed and skill with it was enough to make up for that fact, plus not many people had the strength to counter an attack from his sword, let alone shrug it off like it didn't bother them. He then continued his attack before Naruto disappeared and Zabuza felt a blade as his neck making him freeze. You lose, but I know your ally in the trees won't let me kill you, so I'll let you leave with your 2 subordinates and perhaps you'll be more of a challenge when you haven't used Charka to face someone beforehand. Naruto stated as he turned his blades to the side, blocked the Senbon heading for Zabuza's neck before Naruto sheathed his sword and walked back to the shore. As he walked he idly saw a girl, the smell on her meant it wasn't a boy, land beside Zabuza and take him into a rectangular piece of ice while the demon brothers fell into one that formed under them before both pieces of ice disappeared. Naruto merely returned his attention to the group remaining and walked towards him as Unohana and Tris scanned the different people for injuries before standing beside Naruto. Glad to see that you didn't get rusty after all these years, Itomi-chan, Sasuke-tem, Sarada-chan. Naruto stated with a smirk, making the 3 Uchiha widen their eyes before Itomi and Sarada glomped him in a hug as Sasuke went over to him with a smirk. Naruto-kun. The 2 girls shouted as he chuckled and hugged them back, shocking the other Konoha nin as Kiwon and Kushina had tears in their eyes while Arashi was looking at him analytically. Kakashi was merely gawking at him as Sakura and Yakumo looked confused. Naruto then pulled back and smiled at them, which caused them to blush, and it increased when they realized how well built he was. It's good to see you again, Itomi-chan, Sarada-chan, Sasuke-tem. He stated while Sasuke snorted and fist bumped him since Naruto didn't mean anything by the name, it was just what he had called Sasuke since they first met. Sasuke had decided he was stronger than Naruto and Naruto had replied with, "Oh yeah. Well, just try it, tem." Before they then beat the hell out of each other, with both winding up laying on the ground with grins on their faces at finding someone that could handle a fight with them. Naruto and Sasuke had been friends since and had always looked out for each other up until Naruto left. Now Sasuke could see that he clearly had a lot of catching up to do with his surrogate brother, though he was aware that his mother also had a thing for the blonde, but so long as he didn't have to see it, then he didn't have to worry too much, at least for now. He broke from his musings as Kushina walked up. "Sochi?" Kushina asked tentatively as Naruto then turned towards her with an expressionless face, causing her some hurt. "Hello, Kushina-san," he stated blankly, making her tear up more at the fact he wouldn't call her mother. Naruto then turned his attention to Tazuna. "Tazuna-san, we should get to your home before any more enemies come and before it gets late," he stated, practically destroying the subject of his return, and Tazuna merely nodded before leading them to his home, with Naruto and his group quickly following and the others slowly coming up behind. It took an hour to reach Tazuna's home, where he quickly entered and announced he was home and immediately got a hug from a young woman. "Father, you're back and all right," she shouted while hugging him, and Tazuna laughed and hugged her back. "Of course, I am Tsunami. It's thanks to these super strong ninja that were assigned, though a late arrival saved all of our butts." Tazuna stated as the Konoha groups came in with Tsunami blushing slightly at seeing Naruto. Naruto Uzumaki miss. Naruto introduced himself, not missing the hurt look on Kushina and Kiwon faces or the frown on Kakashi and Arashi's faces. I just recently joined Konoha after been training for a few years away from the village. Naruto stated, kissing Tsunami's hand, making her blush more before she allowed everyone in. My two companions are Triss Marigold and Retsu Unohana, two of my lovers. He stated, making the two women blush with a smile while the other people were shocked at him. Two of? As in you have more than one and more than them? Tsunami asked, shocked, and Naruto nodded yes. Yes, each woman gained a piece of my heart and I a piece of theirs. I'm already engaged to marry one of them as it stands after having been around her for over 5 years. Naruto stated, not at all ashamed or embarrassed to talk about his lovers since there was just nothing to be ashamed about. Everyone merely gawked at him while Kushina felt her heart shattering as not only did her son find someone but was already getting married. It's true, and if it wasn't for Rukia-chan we wouldn't be with him either. Retsu stated with a smile while Triss nodded. Anyway, we'll have close to a week to get ready for when Zabuza comes back and chances are Gato will be adding some more muscle just to make sure we lose the fight. With that in mind, I can handle watching Tazuna during the day while Triss-chan and Retsu-chan can look through the town and can help anyone with injuries. Naruto stated, since it was the best course of action since the genin needed more training and someone had to watch Tazuna while they did train. I don't think we have to divide ourselves like that, Naruto. One team can train while the other watches Tazuna. Kakashi stated, since it would give him and Kushina time to talk to Naruto, only to get a bored look from Naruto. Except we don't know how many extra hands Gato will hire this coming week, and doing your method would mean that the two teams each only got half the time to actually train, and that lowers the odds of survival depending on what we're actually going to face. If they aren't ready, then the more experienced of us here will have our attention divided between fighting and ensuring they don't get overwhelmed, which then puts us at risk along with them. So no, we will not do it that way. Naruto stated, making them see his point as he went to his kitchen and took a scroll out before he began setting up the stove to cook. Tsunami was confused on what he was doing before she saw him reveal food from the scroll and start cooking and came over to help. She refused his comments on her not needing to help since she liked cooking and they were guests, which meant there was even more reason to help cook. Triss and Retsu were interacting with Itomi, Sarada, and Sasuke while attempting to be polite to Kushina, Kakashi, Kiwon, and Arashi. I say attempting because they weren't too happy with how the four treated their lover. While they had tried to help their lover get past his anger, they slowly saw his point of view as he revealed certain truths and idiocies they had followed for idiotic reasons. They did want Naruto to let go of his anger, and he had, but they weren't expecting him to forgive them for their various betrayals entirely, since not only was it against his nature to let such betrayals stand, it was also against his clan's core tenets and laws, both religious and not, and Naruto wasn't going to violate those no matter the intentions behind doing so. So, how long have you known Naruto? Kushina asked, trying to be calm and polite since the mother in her wanted to interrogate and learn everything about them and her son. Retsu merely looked at her a moment. Oh, about 5 years now. Retsu stated casually since she hadn't actually met Naruto during his first year in Iron Country, so she wasn't lying. I see. Are either of you two the one he is engaged to? Kushina asked, wondering if she could at least get to know her future daughter-in-law. No, that would be Rukia, who is in Konoha at the moment. I only entered a relationship with Naruto 2 or so years ago, while Triss has been with him close to 3 years. Retsu stated in the same polite tone. Why didn't you send him home? Kiwon finally demanded, angry that these two women wouldn't send her brother home to his family. Retsu merely turned and stared at her impassively while Kushina, Itomi, Sasuke, and Sarada all glared at her for being rude, And where, pray tell, is his home, Miss Namikaze? With people who ignored him for half a decade. With people who didn't even notice he was gone until an entire month after he left and said people weren't even the ones who noticed he was gone. Or maybe the home you are talking about is the village that despised him for holding that beast inside him despite the fact you and your brother hold the chakra of that beast. By all means, Miss Namikaze, do tell me which one you would like to choose. Retsu stated, making Kiwon remain silent. As to why we didn't, he risked his life and showed his character in reaching our capital city on his own, and it is he who chooses where his home is, not you, and certainly not the two people responsible for his birth. Retsu stated with an edge to her voice and clear venom present when she had said Namikaze. I apologize for my daughter's outburst, it's just we have been worried about Naruto for a long time. Kushina stated, giving Kiwon a look that said they would talk about this later. Then perhaps you should have been concerned about him from the start instead of only when you noticed he wasn't there anymore. Triss stated coldly, making Kushina flinch since she and the others did deserve that. That's enough, Triss. Retsu, if they want any information concerning me, then they can grow a spine and ask me themselves. Naruto stated from the kitchen, having heard their conversation from there. As you wish, Naruto-kun. Retsu and Triss both stated as they returned to chatting about normal things with the Uchihas of the group. It was a short time later that a young boy came in and merely looked at the gathered ninja and two others before scoffing and going upstairs to his room. A couple hours later had Naruto preparing the table, which included a seal to expand it to hold the number of people, as the food he and Tsunade were making was just about finished. Only Naruto's friends had been able to talk to him during that time, as he wasn't feeling too conversational with his ex-family. The group ate quietly, enjoying the food, while the boy from before was still sulking and glaring occasionally at the ninja, which was starting to irritate Arashi. However, there was no incident that night, and everyone turned in for the night, with Naruto and his two girls sleeping in the living area to ensure no one tried to sneak in on the bottom floor. Though Naruto did have to keep his girls a bit under control, since they only occasionally got some alone time with him when Naruto was able to do so, as well as make sure each girl got a turn with him and not a clone. Morning. The next morning had the Konoha group waking up with food already on the table prepared and Tsunade sitting and eating, while Tazuna had already left for work with Naruto. Naturally, a few were saddened by that, since they wanted to talk with the blonde. However, Itomi, Kushina, and Kakashi knew they needed to get their teams into shape and began planning the schedules for training, since Naruto was taking over watching Tazuna. With said blonde, he was standing on a nearby rooftop overseeing the bridge construction, while an army of clones were helping Tazuna after a bunch of spineless cowards quit out of fear, and now his clones were picking up the slack. Evidenced by there being two clones carrying girders, others moving large cinder blocks, and still others setting the steel supports and rivets. Tazuna was grateful for that, since at the rate they were moving, they could be done ahead of schedule and be set even if more workers quit. Plus, the clones were technically extra security for him and the bridge, ensuring that none of Gato's thugs could get close without being seen and taken down. If he had this kind of muscle from the start, then he would have had the bridge done in a matter of weeks instead of months. On the other side of the village, Retsu and Triss were walking around casually, looking over the area and marking anything of interest for Naruto, since he had an idea for wave after they freed the country, and it would serve Naruto well in the future, and Konoha, depending on how nice Naruto was feeling towards the village at any given time. The country would benefit as well, so it was a win-win for both Naruto and the country, with Konoha perhaps getting something from the deal too. It was also to serve as a backup option for Naruto should things not work out with Konoha and Naruto wanted another place to stay besides going back to Iron Country. He loved the people there, but the snow and ice got annoying after a while. Not just the footing problem or the swords occasionally getting stuck in the sheaths from the frost, but as well as it sapping your strength and ability to move. There were benefits, of course: burning fat to get muscle, chakra control exercises by using chakra to warm the body, learning to fight on unstable ground, and so on and so on. Essentially, the country and people were great, but the weather left much to be desired despite the combat benefits provided. Anyway, Retsu and Triss were examining the different buildings that were boarded up or seemed to be on hard times and could close down at any moment. They knew Naruto's plans would benefit the country as much as it would Naruto, which is part of the reason they were all for helping him, since these people would need the help after Gato was eliminated. Even if they managed to take his fortune and use it to help the country, it would take years to rebuild everything back to an economic peak, which is where Naruto's plans would help expedite that and benefit him in more ways than one. This wasn't to say that Naruto only did something if it benefited him, but the combined benefits more than added a bit of incentive to give the help. So why not? They benefit and so does Naruto, which lets them build a better relationship and help the country even faster. The two then broke from their musings and exploration at the sight of a group of thugs harassing a merchant demanding money. Naturally, that didn't sit well with them, and they approached, making the thugs look at them with sneers before they turned to perverted grins. Well, what do we have here? A couple of gorgeous women out alone. Well, we'll have to take care of them, won't we, boys? Idiot thug number one stated, making the other chuckle. Leave that man alone or we will be forced to resort to violence. Retsu stated, making them frown before they saw her sword. Oh, what do you know, boys? The lady thinks she actually knows how to use a sword. Idiot number two stated with a laugh, making the others laugh too. Last chance before you die. Triss stated, her fingers flickering with lightning, not that the fools noticed. The group then scowled. Guess we're going to have to teach these bitches some manners, boys. Number two stated as they drew their weapons before charging the two. However, in a flash, three were cut down by Retsu's sword while the others were hit by lightning from Triss, fingers making them scream in pain as they were electrocuted and burned before dropping to the ground dead. Retsu sheathed her sword as Triss shook her hands slightly before turning to the merchant, who was busy thanking them, and Triss smiled before waving her hands, causing the ground to open and take the bodies of the thugs away. Triss and Retsu then continued walking around the area before they finally stopped at the town square and started helping the people who were either sick or injured, since both preferred being a healer to a fighter. They had originally focused on that and neglected their combat training until Naruto convinced them otherwise. His reasoning being that if they knew how to fight, then they could protect themselves better, as well as protecting possible patients and people who couldn't protect themselves. They had agreed with his arguments and had been keeping their combat and physical training up while also expanding further into the medical arts, which Naruto helped with via the Uzumaki clan scrolls. When a clan has as much chakra and has various effects depending on which part of the clan you took after, it had a wide variety on jutsu and applications. Like Kushina's being able to suppress a biju's chakra was one form of unique chakra the Uzumaki possessed. However, there were others that would be used to heal by pushing the chakra into a person. Where this would normally throw a person's chakra out of balance, this chakra would actually easily be absorbed by the target, letting them heal from life-threatening wounds in a matter of moments. There were others, of course, but the only other big one was the type that Naruto was, a combat type. His chakra was potent, large, and brimming with power. This made him a juggernaut of energy and it powered up his jutsu greatly. Where people could maybe put a tenth of their chakra into a jutsu to get it to activate, Naruto barely needed 1,000th and it was stronger than the opposing jutsu. Naturally, this only suited Naruto even better, especially as he got his control down to that of a cage. While his chakra chains couldn't suppress a biju, his were sturdier and stronger, meaning he could make a shield or weapon of them easily. So he couldn't suppress a biju, but he could still beat the shit out of it or restrain it with his chains. Anyway, Naruto had shared the knowledge of the medical arts with his girls that were interested in that area and helped them both learn the techniques and adapt them, since his girls didn't have nearly the amount of chakra Naruto did. There were even medical techniques that were used for those that didn't have the healing chakra, but still wanted to be a doctor or medic, which only further enhanced their skills. Now they were using said skills to help the people and build a rapport to both help them and Naruto in the future. Tsunade's house. That night, the group was sitting and eating while the genin looked wiped and a bit roughed up. Naruto merely ignored it since if they had done serious training they'd look far worse, be passed out, or would have a bigger aura of accomplishment. So what's our training regimen for tomorrow? Sakura asked as she was a bit scraped up from the training and tired from using most of her chakra. We'll be doing taijutsu training tomorrow and then testing your elemental affinity since it's time you learned at least one jutsu outside of the academy and the couple genjutsu that you know. Sarada and Sasuke will be focusing their control over the couple of jutsu they know since they still need refining. Itomi stated, making the three nod. What difference does it make? You're all going to die anyway. Inari stated bitterly. Inari. Tsunade chastised since she couldn't believe he was being so cruel to the people risking their lives to help them. It's true. They have no chance of beating Gato. Inari stated before Arashi finally got pissed enough and slammed his hand on the table before standing and glaring at Inari. That's it. I'm tired of your mouth, you ungrateful little, ow. Arashi stated before he was forced to sit because of Naruto hitting him upside the head with his sheathed sword. That's enough, Arashi-san. The boy is just venting his pent-up anger and sadness. It's obvious his father figure dying right in front of him made him emotionally wrecked. Naruto stated, sipping the broth from some soup he and Tsunade made before looking at Inari. Tell me, Inari, if it's so hopeless, why haven't you left Wave Country? Naruto asked, making Inari open his mouth before he closed it, not having an answer. It's because you don't want to insult your surrogate father's memory by running away, especially from the place he died fighting to protect. We are now risking our lives to protect your grandfather because he refuses to give up on the dream both he and your surrogate father shared in Wave being free and prosperous. The mission was only to escort him back, not stay afterwards and protect him. We are doing this because we feel we should and want to help Wave, but we can't do that if we have to constantly worry about you getting in the way because you don't think we'll live to see this through. Naruto stated before he stood and patted Inari on his head, never be afraid to stand up for yourself. Naruto stated with a small smile before he headed towards the door. Where are you going? Sarada asked in confusion while smiling at how Naruto handled Inari. Just gonna get some fresh air for a bit, maybe practice with my sword. Won't be the first time I slept under the stars. Naruto stated with a smile as he headed out and Inari merely left and went to his room with a contemplative look on his face. Kushina and Kiwon were tempted to follow him, but decided against it since they didn't want to push too hard after Kiwon's outburst to Retsu the day before. Naruto was a shinobi of Konoha, which meant they had plenty of time to see him. Next morning, Naruto was relaxing under a shady tree as he had spent the night practicing sword strokes and movements before deciding to stay outside that night since it was a nice night out. However, he also was alert since his senses picked up someone coming towards him and based on the scent he was smelling, it was the masked girl who helped Zabuza. Deciding to wait and see what she would do, Naruto didn't react to her presence or worry much since his swords were sealed away and he was merely laying against his folded cloak without a care in the world. Haku had been in the area to gather medical herbs to ensure both Zabuza and the demon brothers were fully healed and recovered by the time the week ended. That plan was paused when she found the man that not only scared her father figure, but also defeated him in a sword fight. If she could remove him, then the likelihood of success would be greater. Though she had to admit, he was handsome and she almost wished that she could convince him to abandon Konoha and join Zabuza. If she were a darker kunoichi, she'd be tempted to subdue him and keep him as her boy toy. She blushed as her mind wandered to things fit only for a certain orange book series and quickly shook those thoughts away as she moved towards him. As she got closer, She slowly reached for his throat only for a hand to grab her wrist as Naruto smirked before she was pulled down and pinned to the ground with Naruto over her. I usually don't mind a cute and beautiful girl waking me up in the morning, but you're the second to have tried to kill me in my sleep. He stated with a smile as he pinned her and Haku growled before using her weight to shift them so she was on top. I won't let you harm Zabuza-sama. Haku stated as her breath came out as a chilled mist. Naruto merely smirked as he shifted his weight causing them to roll on the ground still straddling onto the other till they stopped in the middle of the nearby flowers with Naruto on top. Haku struggled to get free but found herself pinned and blushing since not only was his face close to hers, but a certain appendage of his was also pressed against her thigh and her were against his chest. If I was a threat to Zabuza, I would have killed him during our first encounter. Naruto stated calmly as he looked into her chocolate brown eyes that held the same pain and loneliness that he would have had if he didn't have his friends. Haku stopped struggling a moment before glaring, I will not be a prize either. I'd sooner bite my tongue off than become some village's breeding machine. She shouted only for Naruto to pin her forcefully and glare at her a bit, but it wasn't in anger but disapproval. I have no intention of that either, though I do admit I would like you, Zabuza, and the demon brothers to join Konoha. Gato is a rat and a cheat. If he can get some job done for cheaper then he will, which is why I believe he'll hire someone else for cheaper to kill Zabuza and the brothers while taking you and any surviving women for himself. I will not lose the fight that comes in a week, but I hate to see potential wasted and destroyed before it can flourish. Thus, I am offering you a chance to speak to Zabuza about joining Konoha. I will give my clan's protection over you and them to ensure there is no funny business. The Hokage is a associate and will back me up on letting you join the village. Naruto stated, making her freeze slightly before looking at him in curiosity. It was also the first time she noticed his eyes and she felt drawn to them as they seemed to draw her in further and further into their blue depths. She suddenly snapped back to reality as she realized she was about to kiss him. Blushing, she pulled back and looked away while Naruto merely chuckled. How do I know you are telling the truth? She asked shakily since it would give them security and not worry about running anymore. Meet back here in 3 days with Zabuza and I will have proof that you will have safe passage and protection with Konoha. Naruto stated as he stood and offered this hand to help her up, which she took before nodding and leaving. Naruto then returned to the house and found the others had already headed out for training while the clones he sent back earlier had left to accompany Tazuna. He then paused as a pair of clothes pushed against his back. Oh Naruto, me and Tris-chan need something from you. Retsu whispered into his ear before giving it a slow lick making him hum slightly. Oh, and what would that be? He asked with a smirk as he turned and saw Retsu in a black lace bra and thong that showed off her toned and fit body that complemented her H-cup, doughy, wide hips, plump thighs, and strong legs. Oh, I think you know. She purred as she pressed her tits against his chest and her hand going to massage his in his pants. I suppose I can help with that, but you'll have to show me where Tris is first since I'm sure she's dying to get to me like you are. He stated huskily into her ear making her shiver before nearly teleporting them upstairs and taking him to the room she and Tris had decided to use for this purpose. Asterisk. Naruto exited the bathroom refreshed and satisfied with a sleeping Tsunade in his arms, who also had a fucked stupid look on her face and took her to her room and tucked her in before heading downstairs to keep watch and prepare lunch for the sleeping women. They'd need their energy after the sessions they had and he already ensured to use some medical chakra to make it so Tsunade could walk properly. Yup. Naruto could honestly say it was a good day and it was still getting started.